Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning. I hope you are all hearing us loud and clear. If you can use the chat, you can just give us a 1 if you're hearing to be sure. We want to ensure that everyone, staff, students, everybody is tuned in and listening this morning to our video podcast. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're hearing us?
Good. Good. So we welcome everyone to this morning's session. This morning's session, we are looking at conducting hybrid research. Now, hybrid research, you may have heard different definitions of it. A couple that we have heard, how some people think it's mixed method research. Other people define it as research in the online environment, as well as the face-to-face environment. Now, we are focusing on the second definition, but I'm not going to do this alone. So to keep things clear and to benefit everyone, we have invited a prolific researcher, Dr. Leticia Addison, who she told me to call her Leticia. I'm trying to stick to that this morning.
Yeah.
Welcome, Leticia. It's a pleasure having you. Thank you for being here. And to Mr. Javed Mohammed, a team member at the CETL as well. And, you know, it is interesting that we are here this morning able to do this. And we want to make sure that our goal today is at the end of this session, especially the postgraduate students who would be joining us, would have a very clear, simple idea of how to approach their research design. We know that transitioning from undergraduate to postgraduate could be a challenge for some, especially in terms of research. And we want to ensure that that transition is smooth as possible. And it will make it easier for your supervisor as well. So it doesn't matter where we stand, where we sit in the field. The aim of it is to benefit everyone. Now, if you have a question, we're going to invite you to make use of the chat where we would be able to highlight it and focus on different aspects or concerns of each participant. So again, y'all, a pleasure to have you this morning. And we don't want to waste time. We want to dive straight into it. We want to get our feet dirty. So let's start off, first of all, by exploring some of the advantages and the challenges or the disadvantages. So pros and cons of conducting, firstly, research online. So Leticia, what are some of the benefits you have observed in your practice in online research? Tell us.
Good question. I think one of the main things that we could see with having research online and actually conducting research online is really, really easy to do so in the online space, especially with respect to the fact that we have all of these resources. Geographic locations, we can hit a number of geographic locations just by actually giving out these surveys through whatever mediums, SurveyMonkey, etc. And it's cost effective. You don't have to go out in the field. You don't have a lot of money to spend on that. You could actually just sign up for a platform and actually go on there, create a survey and disseminate. And I think, you know, in terms of the actual cost effectiveness, that strategy is really great for postgraduate students. In that way, you know, you can do this in a short space of time, so it's not as time consuming. So I think, you know, we have a lot of advantages to actually doing, conducting research in that online space.
Yeah, and you know, I like what you said there, because I remember my own practice, not practice, my own experience for my master's research. And I was doing some research on the southeastern end of Trinidad. Getting there every single time was a headache. I'm not going to lie. The roads are not good. It was a headache. And you know, at that point in time, I'm not going to disclose how many years ago, but it was not as easy, or we did not have all the technology that it affords us today.
Exactly.
I don't know what your experience has been like with that, Javed, in terms of, like, you know, geography, the cost saving. Students love saving money.
Yeah.
And
at the end of it all, you know, we try to make it as practical as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at your situation, your current situation. It's not just about answering research questions.
Mm-hmm.
You look at your situation as well.
Mm-hmm.
How practical is it for me to conduct my research online or face-to-face?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you might be able to go to a location geographically,
Mhm.
but you have some limitations in the use of technology.
Yes.
So
that's
there's
true.
a flip side to it,
Mhm.
right? So some of the challenges that
Yeah.
I think researchers need to be aware of would be, and I think this is a significant one,
Mhm.
is the concern for potential bias,
Mhm.
Yes.
researcher bias.
Yeah.
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 So when we talk about bias, we're really and truly talking about the participants or the
Mhm.
pool or the data. It doesn't really represent the target group,
Yes.
Right.
right? So this is something we need to be mindful of. So if you are using the online platform, try as much as possible to not to refrain from bias, right? You as a researcher, you might say, well, okay, just want to pass this course.
Mhm.
I just need to get my grades. And it's difficult for me to get persons from my sample. You know, I already identified my sample, but it's difficult. So, Mark, I know you, and I know you know how to use technology. I sending you that questionnaire
Yeah.
survey. You're falling into the trap
Problems.
there.
Problems.
There's problems. You're messing up your data.
Mhm.
And what this will cause for you as a researcher, somebody will pick up on this.
Yeah.
Somebody will pick up on this later down the road. Also, you will not be able to generalize your findings.
That's it.
All right.
Yeah.
And this is something that you want to pay attention to. If it is in your proposal, you state that your findings will be generalized. And then now in your actual research, data collection, you have bias coming in there and you're going to make generalizations. You're messing up the whole process.
Yeah.
So, and it's nothing is wrong with conducting a research. No, this is my, Leticia, you can correct me. This is my personal feeling towards this.
Yeah.
All right. Nothing is wrong with conducting a study and being unable to generalize
Of
your
course.
findings.
Of course.
Just state it.
Yeah.
Just simply state it.
Yes.
It leaves room for additional research.
Yes.
Right. So that's one of the things you want to think about. Another concern, I believe, is security.
Yeah.
Security, and if it is you're collecting information
Mhm.
from persons, you want to make sure it is anonymous.
No,
You
Javid,
wanna
that
keep it private.
I want to pause you there
Yeah.
because security is a major thing
Yeah.
that persons are not all too familiar with, or they may not necessarily give consideration.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we have enough time for each one.
Mhm.
I want to pull back a little bit before we go into security and privacy and those things. You see that concept of bias?
Mhm.
Because what we have realized is when we deal with students have a fair, what I call a fair understanding of bias.
Mhm.
But so they would know about implicit bias and those kind of things. But then when you're looking at what happens now, when you cannot generalize, when your data is, your findings lack generalizability, that is a whole different kettle of fish. Because as you said, we just want to make sure for the students it is crystal clear. Because you can have a situation where, WhatsApp chat, and you're doing a research on a demographic, let's say 18 to 25. And hear what? Everybody in your WhatsApp group is 18 to 25.
Yeah.
But suppose everybody in your WhatsApp group grew up in the same income level, the same area, they went to the same kind of school. Then you see how we could land in a problem where we cannot now generalize those findings to say that this represents the population of, let's say, Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
Because you're going to completely what's the word I'm looking for? Misrepresent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leticia. The rest of the population.
And
Yes.
I just want to add to what both of you all said. I mean, we tend to, and as when I was a postgraduate researcher, I also, as Javid said and Mark mentioned, you tend to want to say, I want to pass this really fast. So I'm going to do this quickly.
Yeah.
What I can say from leveraging both the academic space as a researcher and then also as a lecturer and then working in a planning office where we actually disseminate surveys, a lot of planning needs to go into the research phase in terms of like what exactly the research question is and what you're trying to extract. In terms of the biases that we're talking about and the generalizability of the results, what a lot of people skip is the initial phase of maybe doing this as a base survey, actually testing to see, especially with, I mean, this is a larger conversation on validity of the questions
Yes.
and the structure of the questions that you ask.
Testing your questionnaire.
Exactly. Testing the questionnaire with a small pool of people
Mhm.
first
Mhm.
and persons in the field as well. And having that, so that actually helps you to kind of reduce some of not only the bias in the questions, but then also think about the pool of people you want to target.
Yeah.
You could never really eliminate the bias completely. But what you have to try to do in that planning phase is to spend most of your time in the planning phase. Because what tends to happen, and especially I realized when I did some consultant work with researchers, is that they jump so quickly into bringing, doing these surveys, and yes, I collected all these surveys, I have all this data, and then when you bring it back now, you realize you're not necessarily answering the questions,
Yeah, of course.
etc. So
Exactly.
you know, so we really have to plan properly.
It's so funny that you talk about planning, and I
Mhm.
didn't think about, conducting a small study before that.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that this morning. But this will also feed well into something that you need to consider if you're going online, which is the technical competence of the participants.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
if in your small test you realize,
Mhm.
well, listen, persons having challenges using the software,
Yes.
the platform, whatever you're
Mhm.
using, technological tool you're using, this sample tests will pick that up and you'll be able to
Exactly.
quickly adjust.
Yeah.
So you need to be
Yeah.
aware of it.
Yeah, and then you need to take into consideration connectivity.
Yeah.
that
For sure.
sad to say, it's not limited to one place. Again,
Mhm.
connectivity is happening everywhere. So you need to be mindful of that in doing, setting up your planning, as Leticia is saying.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Now, Leticia, you hinted to something earlier, and I'm seeing someone is asking about it here. Cost implications.
Mhm.
It's people say, well, it's cheaper just to send everything online. But let's dabble a couple minutes on cost implications, cost savings,
Mhm.
and the cons. What do you think?
Well, we saying saving in terms of at least you wouldn't have to go and pay persons to go out there and disseminate your surveys in the face-to-face
Mhm.
environment. But in that way, you also tend to, I think sometimes as we're talking about not only the bias in itself, it's just that you tend to overlook certain parts of it, as you mentioned. And even even in a planning office setting, we tend to see this happening to where we tend to think that everyone has the same technological background, the
Yeah.
same access. So even like with staff, I would say certain staff may not be accessing a computer or be able to access the survey through an email address. Those are some of the considerations we have at the university level when it comes to actually doing these things online.
Mhm.
So the cost effectiveness is really great, but at the same time, we have to think about it in a general sense of being more representative.
Mhm.
So in that way, I think, those are some key considerations we have to think about. You have the good with the bad. So you
Yeah.
have to really kind of
Yeah.
balance both.
Yeah. And thanks for that, because we're going to get a little further into
Yeah.
cost when we discuss the actual tools.
Yeah.
But, coming back now to the data privacy and security. David, you could continue on that. I hope I didn't throw you off completely.
No, not at all. Well, we tend to overlook these things, right?
Mm.
I'll give you a simple example. A friend of mine conducted an online focus group. So they're using online,
Mhm.
right? As part of their hybrid research.
Mm.
So it's a focus group going on. And he is conducting the focus group. He's online with his participants, and there's no headset.
Mhm.
And the laptop is using the mic.
Mhm.
And I'm hearing everything as a bystander person.
Right.
I'm hearing everything
Mhm.
that the participants are saying. And some of what they are saying, it should be confidential.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that it's supposed to be confidential. I'm not supposed to be hearing that as a bystander,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? You're breaching the ethical
Yeah.
parameters there. So this is what I need for persons to realize when they're conducting online research. Think about all of these
Mhm.
situations that could arise.
Mm.
You don't want people hearing what persons are saying, the participants, what information they're giving you,
Mhm.
right? So you need to be mindful of that. If it's a room, you're locked, or get a headset. A simple thing as a headset, get a
Mhm.
headset.
Yeah.
Ask permission to record.
Exactly.
If you're going to record, ask permission
That's
to
really
record.
important. Yeah.
So all of these things. And then when you record, where's this recording going? So you have to think about these things. But I don't want to open up a can of worms here
Yeah.
with data and security, but I'm just encouraging you all, if it is you're deciding to use the online tools, be mindful of data security.
Yes, and even after you've gathered your data, be mindful of where you store your data,
Yeah.
because you have issues where a computer could crash.
Mhm.
You have issues where somebody could lose a flash drive, somebody else ends up with the data of the whole sample or the population. And you also have the modern day cloud.
Mhm.
So you have to be mindful, especially where sensitive data comes into question, of where I am keeping Javid's data,
Yes.
Leticia's data, and Mark's data. Do you want everybody to know about your address, your age, your income? No. So you're gonna respect your research subjects' data privacy, and you want to make sure that your storage, that you think big picture. So even when you go choosing the survey tools that may be online, be mindful of where their server might be located and how else they may be storing your data.
Sometimes, sorry, Mark, but sometimes you're sharing one platform.
platform, like
Because you don't want to spend too much money. You don't want,
True.
so you pay for a license for one person, but 4 persons have access to it.
Exactly.
That could be a messy situation
Yeah.
later down the road.
And the implications from that too. I mean, for those of you who use SurveyMonkey and those platforms, it pulls the IP addresses. And you get the IP address a lot of the times in the data set. So you have to really be mindful that once you extract the data, now there are settings to turn it off, that sort of thing. But you also have, I mean, and I know Mark will touch on this later on about, that general write-up about what the participants are getting themselves into and what type of data you're extracting. Because that's really key. And especially, I mean, for me in the statistician side of things, once I get a data set, I anonymize it one time. So, and IP addresses included. So you have to delete any sort of identifying information. That's very, very crucial.
Yeah.
As you all mentioned.
It is. So, I mean, we spoke a lot about the online diaspora. Now, face-to-face also has its pros. So we don't want to say, hey, it's just technology and we run down the road with that. Face-to-face has its pros. Let's chat a bit,
Yes.
In your experience, what are some of the pros that you bounced up with face-to-face surveys?
Well, definitely. I mean, Mark, I think this might be up your alley. When I was a teaching assistant, we would give out the student evaluations face-to-face. And I know now Settle would have it in the online space as well. And I could speak for the fact that when we did it face-to-face, I do believe we had a higher response rate. I don't want to say we forced the students to give back, but
there's a nice word for it, a captive audience.
So, you go into the classroom, you have the rapport, the students don't understand a question, and I mean students, and I'm just using that example, but the participants would see you, have a rapport with the participants. If someone has a question, I don't understand this question, they can ask you directly. And, in that way, it's actually a little more interactive. You could actually be more resourceful, have a better rapport with them, and kind of get them to understand why we're doing this instead of interacting more with a machine. You interact with a person, so it humanizes why we're actually doing this study. And I feel like that is still something we need to consider. I mean, we've gone so far into the fourth industrial revolution with all of these technological tools, and but I think that we really do need to consider really keeping some of the traditional methods, depending on the type of study you're doing.
That's it.
Yes, the type of research.
I know, as you said, that building that rapport is one good thing about face-to-face research, especially within the framework of educational research, and especially if we have staff members who are thinking of the scholarship of teaching and learning as far as their own practice goes. If you are conducting your own investigation into some teaching strategy that you have used, and you want to see how it's impacting the students as a part of your reflection, your reflective practice, and then you're going to see if it did, what am I going to change? And you go again with the iteration of the process. Now, the key point is some of that has to be done in the face-to-face environment, because in the online environment, you cannot pick up the participant's face, the non-verbal cues, all those things, body language, all those things feed into what we can now have as a checklist, especially if we're doing action research or research in education,
Of
you can
course.
have a checklist
Yeah.
that you would need these kind of nonverbal cues and those subtle behaviors, the gestures, the body language that we mentioned about earlier. And that now provides a deeper insight into the person's response, into the
Yes.
person's attitude that could help us have a richer,
Of
better
course.
data.
Yeah,
A richer,
definitely,
better
definitely
data.
more meaningful.
Hmm?
But on the flip side,
On the
Yes.
flip side,
on the
let me hear you, let me hear
no, you need to think about the both sides,
you.
right?
Yeah,
Yes.
obviously.
So,
obviously.
so you talk about the pros of
Of
this
course.
space. So
Of
there's
course.
gonna be cons,
Yes.
and you all talk about forcing participants with the student evaluation.
Captive audience, captive audience.
So if you're conducting that face-to-face research,
Yeah.
there's a potential for experimental bias
Exactly.
again
Of course.
because of how you ask the question.
Yes.
Yes.
You trap the students as
Yes,
well,
yes.
and the students need to get out of the classroom because they don't want to be in classroom for too long.
Yes. So that's
So
true.
they just want to answer those questions for you quickly. They probably just want to respect Miss or Sir,
Yes.
and and again, pay attention to how you ask the question.
Mhm.
Of course.
And when you get a response now coming out of the classroom setting, let's say you're in the medical field and you're interviewing a patient,
Right.
your nonverbal cues
Yes.
could cause the participant to feel very
Uneasy,
uncomfortable.
Of
yeah.
course. Of
So,
course.
so a simple, you open your eye big. This person.
Mhm. Yeah, that's your bias, right?
So,
You can influence.
Mhm.
yeah. So
You know, as you say
something
that,
to think
Javid,
about.
I remember I was doing a contingent valuation one time, and that involves you're trying to establish a dollar value to something that's intangible. And you're asking pretty much how much persons are willing to pay for something. Now, if you ask that question in the wrong tone, just the wrong tone,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
gonna bias that response.
That's
and that
very
means your end result is gonna be completely biased. So I agree with your flip side.
It's just something to think about.
It is, and I hope our listeners are, considering the pros and the cons of online. So yes, we have time saving, cost saving. Remember, there's a cost for your license, according to your population size.
Mhm.
The number of surveys that you're going to put out sometimes require that you actually purchase the
Yes,
software. The
exactly.
free version may not be able to accommodate all of those responses. So you
Yeah.
have to keep those in mind. And we spoke about data storage, privacy. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But then we talked about bias. We want to make sure that our data, our finance could be generalizable, that is valid. And we want to make sure that we don't impute researcher bias, experimental bias, implicit bias in face-to-face settings. Where, yes, we want the non-verbal cues, but we have to be mindful of what we would be given off to.
Mm.
Definitely.
So keep that in mind. As you think, as we go on, think and keep thinking about your own research plan, how things are now, going to be affected. Considerations as the topic, key considerations when conducting hybrid research, face-to-face or online. And as Javid said, both sides of the coin all the time. Think about both sides. You
Yes.
have to think about both sides.
I think we have a question there. Anisha.
All right, let's see. So we have, how do you ensure a representative sample? Well, I could give you a beginner's viewpoint to that. To ensure your representative sample, two things. First of all, stick with your supervisor a lot. Ask for advice because you see, just when we are talking here, we talk and we learn off of each other as quickly as we speak. And it's the same thing in research. If you try to do this thing in a silo, you are not going to succeed. To the best of your ability, you're not going to, because you have a supervisor, but you also have other researchers in the field. So a lot of the students reside on ResearchGate. Why not ask another researcher in the field about it? And then, funny enough, there are now these online tools that could actually calculate a sample.
Yeah, sample size.
A sample size for you.
And I could speak to that too.
So you go ahead.
Yeah. So I could give you a perspective. Now, as Mark said, it depends on your kind of your research that you're conducting too.
let me give you an experience from more like social surveys. If you want to think about it in terms of like satisfaction surveys or engagement, for even university surveys, when we try to consider the representativeness of the sample in our context, we have access to our population data.
Right.
And the population, of course, is in terms of the university. So we would think about the demographics, the males, the females, the gender, the sex ratio, the faculty, the number of students in the faculties, and these different things. So we have these different facets of demographics. What we do is when we have the population demographics and then we get the sample demographics, we do a comparison in terms of the ratio. I mean, it has this, and as Mark said, even on tools like SurveyMonkey and these types of things, you'd be able to even calculate sample sizes and estimated sample sizes. But when it comes to representativeness, if you want to have like a really simplistic idea of it in a mathematical sense, and that's a mathematician at heart, you really want to think about the comparison of the population to what you have in the sample. So to put it simply, if I have a population where it has, like, let's say 500 males and 400 females in terms of the students, and then my sample has mostly females, that's not very representative of the population. So you have to give those considerations to when you actually collect your sample data. Is this really in a demographic sense? Did I really capture something that is like a smaller, because remember your sample is basically a smaller version of what your population is. So you really want to kind of think about if this is really kind of giving me a context in terms of what it looks like in the population. I'm just using sex as an example, but of course other things, depending on your study, whatever field you're in, it will be tailored to whatever research you're doing.
Thanks a lot for clarifying that, Leticia. We hope it was helpful. Now, we spoke a lot about the pros, the cons of either. We want to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the actual concept of the hybrid now.
Okay.
Mixing the two.
Sounds good.
And how we could approach it given the ethical considerations that are underlying all forms of research. And don't think that as students we get away from it. There are ethical concerns that must be addressed. So we're going to pause for a cause and we take a word from our sponsors.
We recognize the need to provide alternative pathways for faculty development and have started the UWI Faculty Cafe, which takes on the format of an on-conference where faculty sit around a table, very informal, small numbers, and they share and reflect the use of instructional tools, strategies, and approaches used in the physical as well as online classroom. All of this just in 20 minutes, and as a participant, you will have the opportunity to explore at least 3 tables or sessions within 1 hour in our face-to-face event. So we invite you, come and experience some of those innovative things that's been done by your peers. Certainly I have been inspired, really inspired by the comments and responses of those who've been attending, and we look forward to welcoming you at our next event.
And welcome back, one and all, to our podcast. We hope you had a little good break, stretch your legs, get away, relax your mind, calm your eyes. And as we promised, we're going to dive straight in now to hybrid research, which is a beast of a different nature, horse of a different color, as people say. Now, why would I describe it? Tell us, Leticia, how could we benefit? I'm a student or I'm an academic researcher. How could I benefit from the actual hybrid approach in research?
Well, it's really great to have two sides of the coin. I mean, to be able to have the online space to gather your research and also be able to do this face-to-face. And I think in that sense, what tends to happen, I mean, I would tell you, naturally speaking, when you see two sides of the coin of collecting your research, what you realize is the limitations and also the benefits of each that could actually enhance your study. I want people to realize that you're telling a story about what you did. So we tend to want to be perfectionists about how we actually approach the process. But in that way, when we actually go into having that understanding now of the perspective of the participants from both the online space and the face-to-face space, it could actually help us enhance our study, see the limitations, see things that we could improve. And sometimes you could actually see other things that you could, other things actually come out in that way. So be open to both sides of actually conducting the research in this manner. I think it's very beneficial.
You know, I'm thinking about focus groups.
Yeah.
I was touching base with someone who was doing some research during the pandemic. And I mean, we have to acknowledge that there are severe lessons that we have learned from the pandemic, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
And the use of online platforms is one that we want to take away and keep, because life had to continue.
Yes.
We could not interact face to face, but we want to make sure that we keep those lessons learned. So if I were conducting, not if I were conducting, this person was conducting a focus group on the impact of crime in different neighborhoods. And he ran into a situation where obviously the focus group was online.
Yeah.
But you have a risk with that because you would not be able to get to everybody.
Exactly.
You wouldn't be able to get to everybody.
That's
Now,
very true.
on the flip side of that coin, he also had the in-person focus groups.
Yeah.
The problem with that came when people died
Yeah.
during the study.
Right. Yes.
Participants actually died as a result of the said crime
Yeah.
or the virus. So you're seeing why it is going to take a distinct level of training to keep your focus group approach similar,
Yes.
because you want to keep that kind of that one discipline across the board. That it's what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for here? It's concrete.
Yeah.
It does not vary. And that was something that I never considered until he mentioned it in his case. So it's a learning example. Students, think about it. If you're mixing the two, think about it. Of course, you're going to need to train people to know how to administer these questions the same way. Now, go ahead.
And I'm glad you brought that up, just to quickly add, because what I thought about, and especially for both students and staff, and I know we also have lecturers joining as well. You don't necessarily need to do both at the same time. So for instance, from a university level perspective or administrator perspective, when we conduct engagement surveys for staff and students, it's at the level of the surveys, but then you may want to, especially the higher level administrators in the university may want to say, okay, based on the survey results, maybe we need to conduct focus groups to drill down into what problems students and staff really have in specific faculties or departments. So therefore you can do this, the stages don't always have to coincide at the same time, but you have to be clear about what you're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, it really depends on the study. So for instance, with satisfaction and engagement surveys, once you get the basic information, then you could say, oh, the satisfaction was high in this department or low in this department. let me go and conduct focus groups to go and figure out
Yeah.
what else, so that I could, because remember, we want to improve. This is what we want to do with the research, to improve something, to find some policy insights, to do something meaningful. So I think you have to give consideration to that as well, the stages of how you do it.
Now
Yeah.
we're going to piggyback on that,
Yeah.
and I'm going to make a plug for our own research in Settle, because the students would have seen where we have asked additional questions
Right,
to
yes.
now ascertain why they feel a certain way toward the lecturer, toward the actual survey.
Exactly.
So these are examples of how these things come into play.
Yeah.
And standardization was the word I'm looking for earlier.
Yes, yes.
Standardization
So-
across
so-
those things.
So what you're talking about really
Yeah.
and truly is something to consider when you're going to do hybrid research.
Yes,
Hybrid and using our definition,
Yeah.
right?
yes.
Planning.
Mhm.
So that you say talk about planning. This is where the planning comes
Yep.
in.
Yes.
You need to plan.
Spend most of your time planning, please.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
and as Leticia mentioned, you can conduct the face-to-face
Mhm.
and then later on come and do the online.
Yes.
Yes, or
Or vice versa.
vice versa.
right?
It really
And
depends.
if we're using the same student evaluations here,
Mhm.
we could administer the online survey,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and then in the survey now we can put a question where
Yes.
persons can indicate participation in an online focus group.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
uh-huh.
You understand?
Mhm.
And what you will find coming out of these focus groups is what you mentioned, things come out.
Yeah.
They get rich information
Yeah.
from persons. Because in a survey, there are limitations,
Mhm.
right? You can only ask so much, right? And then persons unable, even though you have open-ended questions, they're unable to articulate their thoughts into writing
Yes.
effectively, right? So when you have this focus group now, you're getting rich
Yeah.
information, you're hearing it from them directly.
Yeah.
And what you need to be mindful about as well, this is bias again coming into play,
Mhm.
because bias is everywhere in this whole
Everywhere.
scenario.
Yeah.
You be careful of how you document persons' responses,
Yes.
course.
Yeah.
right? Be as descriptive, be as clear and concise as possible. Do not put your own spin on things.
Exactly.
So if somebody says that camera stand is black, put that.
Even if it doesn't add up to you.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you understand? So these are some of the considerations. Yeah.
And also you just I want to quickly touch on as well, the way the surveys are, especially in the online space. Sometimes there are skip questions, sometimes we tend to see a lot of that, especially with the surveys that we conduct where people sometimes skip a whole
Yeah.
different, so you have to really determine which questions are compulsory, which questions, so that's why the planning is very crucial.
Mhm.
Also, the online surveys, sometimes, and I think we touched on this before, given incentives sometimes tends to make people not to be as honest because they
Aha.
want to get the
Yep.
prize, right?
Yeah.
So we tend to be, we need to look into those things. So that's why having the complementary part, if it's possible, because even as Mark said, sometimes it's not always possible to get the face-to-face component, depending on the kind of study you're conducting.
That's true.
But you definitely need to give those considerations. I know some of y'all are in STEM fields, some of y'all are in social sciences, all these different fields, but at some point, someone must do some sort of research or interaction with persons. So give all of these things consideration.
Yeah.
And the sad reality is that as a research subject, I might be a yaysayer or a naysayer, and I would go into a
Yes.
survey and hit bam.
Yeah.
All fives or all yeses or
Yeah.
all no's, because I'm just trying to get it done. And even better if there's an incentive. So I'm hitting them 30 seconds for a 5-minute survey
Yeah.
Yes.
just to make sure that I come in and participate. So it comes back to, as Javed highlighted, planning. And as researchers already in the academic forum of research, or if you're a student, be mindful that most of the time, sadly, these problems you only see when you are now conducting your research. So perhaps in the past, you have opted to be a yaysayer, and now you're going to realize that actually comes back to bite you when persons do you that. So we encourage all persons, especially given the forum that we are operating in academia, whether staff or student, be mindful of, yes, conducting research, but being an able participant in the research. So we have a question in the chat here that I think we want to highlight. Would you say that the mixed methods approach is hybrid research? So what we defined earlier, or let me not say define because I'm not labeling that as mine. What we identified earlier is that often there are two definitions for hybrid research. So most persons are familiar with just what the question asks. Hybrid research is mixed method research, which is quantitative and qualitative. So you have your questionnaire, but then you have your focus groups, you have one-on-one interviews and observations and those kind of things. What we are focusing on today is the other definition of the hybrid research, which is having research or surveys, interviews done using online or done in the physical face-to-face environment. So we want to keep that in mind as we proceed. And of course, feel free, any questions, you go ahead, type it up in the chat. We're going to strive to answer it. And we want to continue to make it an impactful discussion for all of us. All we can do is come out better and benefit. And that's the meaning.
And I want to add to what Mark said. So even if, I think it's hybrid within hybrid, in the sense that we have the online and the face-to-face, but within whatever research you're doing, I think all of us in the story that we're telling, we will have that qualitative and quantitative component, no matter what. Because I came from a predominantly STEM background, and then I've also been in my field of work and also in lecturing, I've been within the social sciences field, and I've seen similarities where it's an all-around, a multidisciplinary approach where everyone has some sort of data that they need to analyze. And then you also need to go into interpretation of that data. And what am I doing? Because remember, the point is, what are you doing with it? Some of you all rely heavily on the quantitative, some rely heavily on the qualitative. But I think in the end, we all tend to have an idea of both in the research that we do. And we end up having, the two sides of the coin within the research. Especially research students in the end, when you write your theses, your research papers and all these things, you will have to have both a quantitative and a qualitative mindset. So it's important to think about both.
I like that. Hybrid and hybrid.
Yes.
Hybrid and hybrid. I like that. Now, hybrid and hybrid, face to whatever.
Yes.
What we cannot get away from is ethics.
Right.
What we cannot get away from is ethical considerations. So, Leticia, tell us, in online research, what are some of the ethical challenges that, we have to cater for?
Definitely informed consent, particularly with the surveys. I tend to see people send out surveys without letting the participants know what they're getting into, the risks, the benefits, the challenges, the purpose. You have to give persons that context to encourage them to understand, why is it necessary for me to be a part of this study? And ethically speaking, you're dealing with human subjects. Now, we go into the Bellman report and all of these other things from years ago, but definitely understand that there's a level of respect we need to have when we're dealing with persons who are giving us that kind of information. Of course, I know the medical sciences persons will know this very well, right?
Definitely.
Especially in that type of data. So you need to make sure that when you go into this process, and of course, Mark, I know you'll touch on later about where you could think about getting information on these ethics, especially with respect to the university. You need to really outline these things carefully, because you're dealing with data that is really, and a lot of cases, supposed to be anonymous and confidential. So why should, you have to tell them why they should trust you with their data and their opinions. So that is really, really key to safeguard the participants in the study in that sense. You have to build a level of trust. And in that way, we need to really protect the sensitive information that we get from persons. So it's really, really important to think about the ethics.
I was going to talk about the ethical considerations in the face-to-face environment or face-to-face research, right? Again, you have to maintain a sense of well-being and safety of the participants.
Of course.
Right. So and how do you do that? Leticia was mentioning. You could correct me again. Debriefing.
Yes, definitely.
This could be done through a debriefing session. You let them know exactly the who, what, when, where, why of the research. You understand? And this will comfort the participants
course.
somewhat.
Yeah.
The other thing you would want to do, and I make a note of it here,
Mhm.
is to look at the ethical guidelines
Yes.
regarding the university's research assurance form.
Yes, yes.
Now, if you go through this form, you will realize that you are looking at committing yourself to ethics,
Mhm.
the ethical considerations. You're going to get informed consent, confidentiality, it speaks to confidentiality, and participant welfare.
Mhm.
So that's something you need to be mindful of. Now, again, data security, even though you're collecting data, hard copy,
Mhm.
Yeah.
where are you keeping this information? How is it stored? In the
Mhm.
trunk of your car, the back seat of your car, on your office desk, in work, where everybody is seeing it? No, you need to be mindful of it. This is
Yeah.
people trusting you with their personal information,
Yeah.
and you need to treat with that accordingly.
Yeah, and
Right.
it's going to affect your own reputation.
Mhm.
It's going to affect your own reputation and career.
Yeah.
As a researcher, you have to be mindful of that. Now, you may be seeing in the chat, we just placed a link. Great, I'm seeing a thumbs up from one person, so they're seeing it.
Yes.
I am asking because we have that nice connectivity hiccup that we're trying to overcome, and we want to make sure everything is back in order. So we have that link that would take us to a very wonderful resource toolkit put together by the Office of Graduate Studies and Research.
Mhm.
And we want to encourage your students to visit it. Not just students, let me just say students, staff as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
both students and staff.
Students and staff, please visit it so that you can get acquainted with the actual forms that you have to fill out.
Yeah.
There is a course, a short course that is a requirement in some cases.
Yeah.
So please familiarize yourself with the environment. Again, we've reposted it.
And I just wanted to add to what Javid said, because I think we're talking a lot about surveys, focus groups, and these things. But just understand as well, for persons who are accessing data sets from databases. Now, this is a whole other topic. There's already AI and these things where you could get data. But I also want to say,
Keep that fella, keep AI in the bag. Keep AI in the bag.
But, what I wanted to let you know, especially for students, when you, and I mean, of course, lecturers and researchers would know this. Even if it's not a survey, when you have to write a research paper on some sort of organizational data that you access from a database and whatnot, you have to get the specific permissions, especially if it's like, just say, data based on employee data, or even like retention levels, let's say, because I could speak from my own perspective of doing a student retention study.
Right.
So I would have needed to access data from the university for that sort of study.
Right.
It was not a survey, but
Secondary data.
it's secondary data, exactly. But you still need to have some sort of a written approvals that you that you were able to access the data and give any specific permissions to use that data for, let's just say, a research paper and whatnot. And also a lot of the journals would ask you for that consent
Yes,
beforehand.
Yes, that
So
is true.
think about that
Yeah.
as well.
And I mean, that's publication, but even in,
Yes,
you consider your own contractual requirements
right,
that
definitely.
you do not want to mess up
Yes,
with ethics there.
exactly.
So don't just jump out willy-nilly.
Yeah.
Go with the plan
Mhm.
and consider all of these things. So we identified you cannot hide from ethics.
Yeah.
Hybrid, face-to-face, you cannot hide.
Yes, no matter.
We established that.
Qualitative, quantitative.
Right.
Yes.
And now we were able to see how that hybrid approach of using the technology
Mhm.
and using the face-to-face helps us to build this beast that is a serious machine, as long as we know the rules that we define
Yes.
to control it, because we can get richer data as we move along. So we want to pause again. And when we come back, we want to discuss a bit about the actual choice of technology. And we're seeing one question, probably we could take this one before we pause. If midway in data collection, persons are unable to do face-to-face, as with the pandemic, and have to resort to virtual collection, would the researcher have to pre-test their instrument again? That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. And again, I would start that if you're doing research as a student, first point of call is your supervisor.
Yeah.
First port of call,
Definitely.
supervisor. Because we don't want to say yes.
Yeah.
And we don't want to say no. Because the situation that you find yourself in at the point in time can vary.
Mhm.
Again, not just that it is a pandemic, but there are other extenuating circumstances that you must consider. So there is no hard and fast answer for it, because yes, you've pre-tested it already. Some might say yes. I'm going to be honest. Some supervisors say yes, and some supervisors will tell you, let's pull back a little bit. So first protocol, supervisor.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So folks, we're pausing for a cause, take a stretch, a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
You.
And we are back. We are back with our last segment, and we want to be sure here as we go along that we get to cover the possibilities thanks to technological advancements, and not just the fact that yes, we could, and things we couldn't do before, not just that, but what have some of these advancements made possible, especially with respect to methodologies? What are some of the insights you all could share with the audience today?
Well, we have a host
Yeah.
of technological tools. I mean, we've been talking a lot about SurveyMonkey. There's Qualtrics. There are a lot of different tools to do the survey aspect of things. For the persons who in more quantitative fields, I mean, if you have a lot of large data sets, you might want to use, some persons use SPSS to analyze the data. Then you have MATLAB, you have R, you have a lot of tools. I think what you need to be mindful of is what your study is and what tool would really, really complement whatever study you're doing. If it's a survey, what is the best tool? I would always say though, persons always trying to figure out which is the best tool, and I think persons in social research, analyzing data sets sometimes try to figure out which is the best to analyze and these things. I will always say that Excel is always your friend as well, right? So don't always just jump into the most,
And he's free.
yes. And
Yeah,
you
he's
start
free.
with, I still use Excel quite a lot, and even with SPSS, R, MATLAB, all of these sophisticated tools, I would like persons to know, even if you conduct a survey, so even in SurveyMonkey, when you download it, you could download it in the Excel format or the CSV file,
Right.
whatever format,
Right.
and you just look at the data. I always tell my students, please just make friends with the data and try to see what insights you get in there initially. Just by looking at it, if it has some quantitative component, you could make some graphs, you could just analyze the data very simply in Excel first before you move on to the other tools. So you just have to think about, there's a host of tools out there, but it really aligns to the specific field that you're in.
Mhm.
At the same time, making sure it aligns to the field,
Yes,
make sure it aligns to your competency. as
of
well.
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
That's
Right.
very, very good
So-
point.
So make sure, if it's new to you,
Yeah.
spend the time learning how to navigate the
Of
platform.
course. Yeah.
All right. Excel is wonderful.
I guess Power BI, which is similar
Oh,
to
right.
Excel
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
And now go.
Yeah.
And now to mention that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try and give you a situation.
Yeah.
You have your, let's stick with an ecosystem, M365 ecosystem,
Yeah.
right? So you create a MS form.
Mhm.
That information, so you have the form created, persons respond to the form, they
Mhm.
submit, they hit the submit button.
Mhm.
When it hits the submit button, you can set everything up now using Power Automate, right?
Right.
To automate your responses into an Excel spreadsheet.
Right.
Then you have that spreadsheet talking to Power BI, doing
Right.
some
Right.
analysis
Yeah.
for you,
Mhm.
right? We can't show you how to do that today,
Yeah.
but explore the options. Once you define your parameters, once you define that early
Mhm.
and set this up, it's just a matter for you now later on after the data collection process to go in there and get that data quickly and possibly have some rough analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can use that to start.
I realize you're slipping 365 there.
Yeah.
That's something the university has already.
Yes.
Students have access to it.
Ah, so what you're telling me is if I wanted a free platform that I could use to create forms, sort my data,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and do some level of analysis, I already have something free available
Yeah.
from the university.
Mhm.
Huh.
Mhm.
I hope you're listening. I hope you didn't miss
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Sometimes you have these tools, it's simple. Use it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we have a range. We've seen one in the chat. That's one. We have Survey Planet, Survey Monkey, Survey, a whole set of them.
Mhm.
You have Qualtrics. And keep in mind that when you're choosing, as Leticia, you pointed out, planning, please think free versus paid version. See what you're going to get.
Yeah.
We cannot tell you today because by tomorrow, those things change.
Change,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's how it always happens. Those licenses change all the time. So you have to see what are the possibilities open to you. But I really like that suggestion, Javed, that you made of using 365, especially here within the campus framework. And Leticia, I must piggyback on what you said about Excel being your friend. And I want to align that and merge that with the concept of the research networks
Yeah.
that we spoke about earlier.
Mhm.
Ask a question to a colleague, a peer, a student, whoever it is. Because just last year I had to call you about something that was
Yes.
frustrating me in Excel. I was like, okay, I need a guideline. I need a guide. Is this correct? Is this wrong? I need a second pair of eyes. Sometimes, not sometimes, do it.
Yeah.
Do it. It's a collaborative approach, not just in teaching and learning, but for the scholarship of teaching and learning. So in any kind of research, we want to use that mindset when we approach it. Now, Javed mentioned having data that's gathered there already. So you're telling me that I can now have a kind of retrospective examination of the data. And now I can, although I have the data in Excel, I don't want to, we don't want to not acknowledge the fact that research could be done by video recordings and audio
Of
recordings.
course. Yeah.
We don't
We must
ever want to
mention
do
that,
that.
Yeah.
Because there is no point in having all of the technology or having a car and all we could do is go backward and reverse. You have many other functions and we need to use all of them. So if we're doing video recordings, you could catch your cues. So if you're limited to not being able to do face-to-face and you have to do it virtually, if there's a camera available, you could catch your cues. So we want to be mindful of those kinds of things and how, again, planning is necessary because I have to define my protocols of what is my checklist, what behaviors am I looking for, and how am I standardizing the same thing that was done in the virtual or the online environment in the face-to-face.
Mhm.
Hands down, it must be. So we're seeing that, yes, technology has this rule. But what advice now do you have for researchers? Leticia, what advice would you give to persons considering conducting, now planning, research in the online or the face-to-face environment?
I think across the board, no matter where you conduct your research, I mean, I think I've said this a few times in terms of the planning aspect is very key. Spend the most of your time actually understanding, okay, so what is my research question, the overall umbrella of what I'm trying to achieve. And from there, have some measurable questions, objectives. Don't make it too complicated. Start very simply. I think sometimes people tend to want to be fancy.
Yep.
And then they go to make things overcomplicated. You have to be very simplistic initially. I want to plug the statistician part of this, which would be make sure you understand the data you're collecting and the type of data
Mhm.
for the person. So in the quantitative and the qualitative fields, what kind of data am I collecting? What sort of research questions? I always say make it measurable. Remember, whatever
Yeah.
software tools you're using, at the end of the day, it's kind of like a mathematical way or a numerical way they're going to interpret your data, be it text or be it numbers, whatever way it is. So you have to ensure that the data you're collecting or the actual questions you're asking, make it measurable. So if I'm going to look for hunger, I'm going to measure the level of hunger in persons. How am I going to do that? The frequency of times they ate per day, the calorie intake, what exactly is your measure? It may differ for someone in the medical field, it may differ for a social scientist. So understand in the planning process, you're going to be thinking about the data, the variables, the key question you're trying to answer, the research goals. What exactly am I expecting in the end, my expectations, and of course the audience. I think, who are you writing this for? You know, is it for an academic audience? Is it for a business audience? Is it for a scientific audience? And give all these considerations. And within there, you will see, as Mark and Javid mentioned, the level of expertise that you would need to match in terms of like what sort of analyses you would need or require. And of course, please, the students, please, your supervisor, your first point of contact. In terms of statistical analysis and these things, there are a myriad of resources online to assist you with that. Tools, as Mark mentioned, with the tools on the research, the campus, the graduate studies website, tools for both quantitative and qualitative analyses.
And I'm highlighting it again. It's there on the screen. I'm highlighting it.
And of
we
course, the
don't-
ethical considerations.
exactly.
So it's
Don't
a number
wanna
of things in the planning
Yeah.
process. And once you do that, it makes it so much easier when you go out in the field now. It would be a perfect process, of course. The limitations, don't shy away from the limitations. Please always point that out so that someone else who reads your study could say, oh, this is what happened there.
Yeah.
You know, everybody wants to get significant variables on these things.
Yep.
But, you know, everybody wants significance, but you know,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, your study is unique to
Exactly.
what you actually did.
And you know, as
Tell
you
the
said it
story.
before, you
Yeah, tell the
that's it.
story.
You telling a story. Your story is not mine. Javid, what about you?
Well,
take out.
Leticia mentioned a lot there. Stay up to date.
Yeah.
Stay up to date with the
Mhm.
technology.
That's a good one.
Right? With that said, spend time learning the technology.
Of course.
Right? If you're using the technology, learn how to use it. All right. If you're getting assistance, somebody is doing the techie part for you, still be aware of how the system works.
Yes.
Persons can tell you something and it could be incorrect.
And not just that, that has to
Right.
go in your write-up here.
Yeah.
Of course.
That's in our
Right. Keep it simple. You mentioned that. Let's just say, keep it
Please.
simple. Keep it simple. You could do a technical study using simple tools, right? Keep it simple. Something else that came to mind. This. Be mindful that this approach, this multi-pronged approach or hybrid approach, will, if done correctly, add validity and reliability.
Of course.
Right. So that's it. That's it for me.
And you know, what you're saying there, Javid, leads into something. Research is not a selfish thing. You research not to pass a course. You research to add to data and information and knowledge
Yes.
to the world.
Right.
So keep that in mind when you get these things and it's your story. The good, the bad, you add the knowledge because somebody else is learning from your own experience. And we want to use that not just for the students, but also for the already established academics.
Of course.
Wherever you are in the phase of your career in research, be mindful of that. It helps someone. I cannot help but thank you all so much for being here today. I think we could possibly allow a couple questions. We have literally 2 minutes. If anyone has a question, you can feel free. We've also, as part of our own focus on not doing stuff, as we said earlier, willy-nilly, we use a research, a data-driven approach to doing things. So you would see in the chat that we have posted a link that is to somewhat like a user experience survey based on today's session. Tell us the good, the bad, what you think we could have done better or differently, or what worked for you. Now you hear how directly I'm stating those 4 things. And you want to be copying that in your survey preamble that Leticia highlighted earlier. That informed consent and all those things. Be very clear and specific in giving participants an idea of what your expectations of them are and what they themselves could expect if you're not around, if it's being done in the online environment. So I want to say thank you. Those definitely were priceless gems, nuggets that we all shared, we all were able to talk about. I really hope the audience enjoyed it. I enjoyed being here this morning. It's always good to be in good company, but it's also good to learn, and we continue to learn. And we don't want to downplay our opportunities for learning. And we want to take every opportunity. Students, share your research, conduct your research. Please complete your course experience reviews. That would help us, help you.
I think now you'll have a new appreciation
Yeah,
to the process.
Yeah. And staff, we encourage you to keep on being excellent mentors and supervisors. I hope you all benefited, but not just benefited, you all enjoyed the session. We hope you had fun.